Today we're looking at Neverout, which despite the name is out today. Neverout is a puzzle game that was initially released for Gear VR and is now here to enjoy on our more powerful machines, with nice new graphics. The premise is very simple. You're in a box. A cube, you could call it.
A cube.
A 6x6 cube. Your goal is to walk around in the cardinal directions and solve puzzles. In addition to the 36 tiles you've got on the floor, you can also walk on the walls, so you can walk on every surface of your cube. Whenever you walk into a wall, the wall is now the floor, and what used to be horizontal is now vertical, and vice versa. This means that, say, for example, a box that was previously chilling on the other side of the room from you is now on the ceiling, and oh god, you're dead. This mechanic of walking on walls and shifting gravity is at the heart of the 60 plus puzzles that make up the game. You'll complete 20 puzzles and emerge in some kind of hub zone, where you'll then go on to tackle a green, red, yellow and blue area. Each area has a theme that was introduced in the first 20 levels. Green has electric no entry spots, red has magnetic tiles that will secure a block in place, yellow answers the question of what it would be like if there were more blocks than usual, and blue has teleport tiles, which are neat when used in conjunction with the gravity mechanic. The first 20 levels don't take very long, because they're only really there to familiarise you with the different mechanics. You'll get a little taste of each of the areas, a bit of spikes here and a bit of electricity there. As a result of this, many of the early levels are barely puzzles, because the amount of entropy is so low that they pretty much solve themselves, which is fine, but they do make up about a third of the total content. The puzzle mechanics are genuinely fun. I found myself pretty darn immersed when trying to solve them, and this was absolutely aided by the visuals and sound design. It's very simplistic, there's very few assets going on, but it has to be said, Neverout looks and sounds great in its own stylized way, even if the slightly unsettling atmosphere is massively underutilized. The mechanics are fundamentally good, and it's nice to be in there. However, there are some big problems that have to be addressed that really sour the experience. First up is the movement. As I said, you move in the cardinal directions. You're on a grid and you can step forwards and at any time do a 90-degree turn to the left or right. You can also look around in full 360 degrees. And if you wanted, you could do all of the turning in the game by turning on the spot in real life. If you pass the 45-degree threshold when turning and press forward, you'll go in the direction you're closest to looking at. Having choice is a good thing, but these two systems do not play nicely together at all. Say you look forwards, think, I'm gonna go this way. Then you press forwards whilst innocently looking around. Well, you're not going forwards, mate. Or at least what you thought was forwards. When you're moving, you need to pretend like you're wearing a neck cast. It's very easy to confuse the movement, and it's quite disorienting. It's not like it's unplayable. If you're conscious of the limitations, you'll make less and less mistakes, but it's definitely unnatural. Really, I think they should have locked the movement to your body position, but because in the game you have no body or hands, I guess this would also be a bit weird and unintuitive. Next up is the length. Taken directly from the press kit, Neverout supposedly has over 5 hours of intense puzzle solving experience. It took me an hour and 47 minutes, including a toilet break. To break it down, the first 20 puzzles took me 12 minutes, the green sections puzzles took me just under 50 minutes, and I'm not sure why, but I had been drinking a bit. After beating those, I started to think a bit more before making my moves. The red and yellow sections then took me 16 minutes each, and the blue section took me 15 minutes. Sadly, there's nothing exciting waiting for you at the end of completing all the puzzles. Nothing cool like hard puzzles with more integrated mechanics or anything, and that's probably something to do with the next issue I had. The size of the cube severely inhibits puzzle creation. Think about the moving parts. They don't have room to move. The size of the cube, which may or may not be the fault of the game's mobile phone origin, majorly limits what they could do. I've got to quickly say that I'm not a puzzle game whiz. Stick me on something like Blocks That Matter, which is a fantastic puzzler by the way, and I'll be groaning and straining as much as the next guy. By the end of my time with Neverout, I was much less enamoured than I was about an hour earlier. This might be due in part to the order in which I tackled the problems. I just picked a colour. The blue puzzles were absolutely the worst in there. A few of them shone because they utilised gravity and teleporters in novel ways. But by the end of the blues, I felt like I was repeating the same puzzle again and again, which is a real shame because they were the end of the game for me. I solved probably 3 blue puzzles in a row within a total of maybe 20 seconds thinking time. The rest was just going through the motions. The red puzzles, barring a few, were also very formulaic. Because of the total amount of places where things like platforms and magnet pads to stop the blocks can go, there wasn't really any opportunity to mislead you, just a linear path to the end. This is made worse when you chuck things in like magnet blocks. A few of them were hard to populate, but generally they weren't. The size of the play area and seeming requirement that the only way you can fail a puzzle is by death meant that you couldn't accidentally put the block somewhere you couldn't retrieve it, which is actually a fundamental mechanic in classic push the block games. There were no magnet blocks you had to avoid or anything like that. Sadly, with a 6x6 grid and the few mechanics on offer, even 2 hours pushes the puzzle design into repetition. Something that's funny is that this game is pretty much a beat-for-beat copy of another game the developers have made, called Out of the Box. Now, I'm really not going to shit on them for this. I think what they've done with Neverout is transformative. I just think it's funny that they decided to make this game about mice getting a block of cheese out of a cube, and reskin it as a tribute to the 1997 cult hit Cube. Out of the Box actually has some advantages over Neverout, in that you can enjoy the actual puzzle in its truest sense a bit more when you're able to see everything and think about it holistically. On balance, I think it's really an advantage for Neverout, as the aesthetic and immersion from being in there in first person helps the relatively simplistic puzzles to go further. Now, I've resisted my initial temptation to explain why the puzzles were so thin with me by demonstrating it, and that's because I don't think that Neverout is not worth playing. Honestly, I think it's a good game for people who don't really do puzzles, and I'd happily chuck a kid on it with no regard to the long-term impact of VR on a child's development. In other words, unless you have a huge, and I mean impressive, bonk on for the movie Cube,
motion detectors integrated into the walls,
I can't recommend Neverout at its release price. Coming in at $10 or £10, which is not the same amount of money, but that's VAT for you. That's all. I hope you've enjoyed this review. I've got another one coming out shortly for To The Top, a hip and fresh new climbing game, so look forward to that. Let me know what puzzle games you enjoyed. Maybe I did too. And I'll see you next time.